Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info. All We Ever Wanted Was Everything by Luke Barnes is the latest production from Hull-based theatre company Middle Child, in a style of performance the company has labelled gig theatre. After a run at the Welly Club in Hull in June, the production will hit the festival circuit this month, opening with a performance in the Cabaret Theatre at Latitude in Suffolk on the festival's closing day. A few days before the festival opened, I spoke to Middle Child Artistic Director Paul Smith, and I asked him to explain who Middle Child are.
Middle Child, we're just moving into our 6th year, and we're a theatre company who basically exists to try and do things a little bit differently. We all come from towns where theatre wasn't necessarily popular for various different reasons. And so our sort of provocation to ourselves really is, how do we make theatre that appeals to people who don't think theatre's for them? And the form that we've settled on is gig theatre. And where we're based up in Hull, live music is massively popular and you know, has a real young audience that go and see live music regularly. And so what we try and do is just try and merge those two things that we love, which is live music and telling a good story. And yeah, as I say, that's a response to us feeling like a lot of the time theatre can alienate certain groups of people, or that it can feel a bit like a sort of special club, and if you're not in it, it's not for you, you're not welcome. So yeah, basically Middle Child are a group of creatives who want to kind of offer a new form of theatre and a new way of people interacting with theatre.
So why did you end up in Hull?
We get asked that a lot, actually. We love Hull. We first of all, we all came up to university here about 10 years ago now, and we fell in love with the city. There's just so much going on here. There's a real creative spirit. There's a real sort of direct, straight down the line attitude from the people here, and so we just fell in love with it. And after finishing university, we all went off to various different drama schools and went off to work in the industry. And there was just something missing, really. And we felt like Hull was a place where we could make a difference, where we could be part of a really exciting creative scene. And I mean, this was just before Hull became City of Culture. Yeah. And so it was a really different city. And we've seen a massive change in the 6 years that we've been here making work. But yeah, basically, we just love the sort of the creative spirit of the city. And it felt like the right place for the kind of work we wanted to make.
This show that you're taking to Latitude in Edinburgh, All We Ever Wanted Was Everything, you've already done it in Hull. So what is it all about?
It's a modern day epic. Basically, it follows two characters raised in Hull, and we first meet them when they're born, actually, in 1987. And they're born into a world where Margaret Thatcher has just been elected for the 3rd time. She's become Britain's longest-serving Prime Minister. And we then jump 10 years straight away into 1997. So the characters are now 10 years old. Tony Blair's just been elected, and there's a sort of there's a real surge of enthusiasm in the country. New Labour's just been born, and everyone's got all these high hopes of Blair's Britain, Cool Britannia. It's a really cool place to be living. And so we first meet them at 10 years old. We see the things their parents promised them. We see them get told that things can only get better, which was kind of the slogan of the time. Yes. And then, we spend Act 1 sort of, I suppose, watching them part nostalgically, we kind of see them and see the dreams for the future forming in their young minds, really. Then we jump another 10 years to 2007, when they're 20 years old, and suddenly it's broken Britain. It's Gordon Brown's just taken over. We're at war in Iraq. We're at war in Afghanistan. And it just feels like a very different place to be living, a very different country, a very different mood. And at 20 years old now, both of them are sort of at different points in their life. One of them's at university. One of them's got a sort of job that she hates. And I guess they're starting to see that the life they were promised hasn't quite turned out how they thought it might. Yeah. And so we follow them at 20 years old and see how they've changed. And then we jump another 10 years to the final part of the show, which is today, 2017, modern day, and they're 30 years old. So basically what it does is it tracks the journey of what it means to be a millennial, what it means to have lived through Blair, through Thatcher, through Iraq, through Afghanistan, and how that's affected who we've become. So yeah, that's kind of a long-winded way of saying it's about where we've come from and where we're headed next, basically, the kind of world that we're going to leave behind.
Yeah, and about the promises that were made. I saw Luke Barnes, your writer, he said, I remember what it felt like to be promised the world and for it not to deliver. And another Luke Wright, his play, What I Learned from Johnny Bevan, is also looks at the promises that were made by the Blair government and how people dispirited. But there seems to be a rise in political theatre at the moment. I don't know if you've noticed that, have you?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I mean, the world is crazy at the moment.
Yes.
And it feels really difficult to make political work because, you know, we were in the midst of making this show and then suddenly Donald Trump gets elected and you're like, well, I don't know how we respond to that. Yeah. And then Brexit happens, you know, all these different things that you're trying to have to respond to. So I do think there's a lot of political theatre, but, you know, I think the very nature of making theatre that talks about what it means to be human is political anyway. So I think that the thing that we like to try and focus on is our work tries to understand what it means to be human. And yes, that there's a political backdrop to that, and the politics that we live through affects that. But actually, for us, it's about, you know, what does it mean to be human? What does it feel like to be human?
But is there a sense of trying to make sense of what's happening in the world at the moment as well through theatre? I think
there is. I think there's a sort of a group. You know, what is this? What's happening? What does this mean? But as I say, I do think it has to come back to stories, and it has to come back to how that affects humans. I don't think it's so much. I don't think people want to make work about policies and about you know, Brexit negotiations. I think it has to come back to what that does to me as a human, what that does to other people living in this world, and how that affects our lives, our day to day. I think it's that kind of political theatre that has seen a rise. It's the stories that we need to try and understand better. Yeah,
and the stories of each other and people with different opinions to us as well, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that feels more like prescient than ever at the moment, I think, trying to understand different ways of thinking and different ways of understanding the world. And I think I'm really interested in that at the moment and trying to sort of see other people's point of views better, which I just don't think we do very well at the moment in the world generally.
No, I think that's become very obvious in certainly the last 12 months, hasn't it? But to look at
absolutely.
A very different angle, another quote from the writer Luke Barnes was, "We want to create theatre where people feel like they might have sex afterwards." So what's that all about?
That's Luke's way of saying that we think theatre works best when it's a social event. What we really, really want to do is bring people together to, as I said earlier, to consider what it means to be human. And I think certainly in our generation, I mean, I'm 30, so I'm sort of right in the millennial thing, really. Yeah. There's a big feeling that we live our lives through screens, and that although we're more connected than ever before, we're also less kind of immediate than ever before. So I think the sort of theatre that we're interested in is stuff that puts people in the same room and asks big questions about life and about what humanity means. So yes, there is that side of it that Luke mentions, but it's very much about saying to people, look, let's connect with each other. Let's have these conversations. Let's be in the same space at the same time, rather than necessarily communicating on WhatsApp or Twitter or Facebook or, you know, all these different things that are brilliant and do have really great sides to them. But yeah, I don't think that's where theatre has its strengths. I think theatre's strengths are about, you know, being in this space with this audience at this time. Yeah, the immediacy of it. Absolutely. And also the other part of that is we're massively influenced by John McGrath's book, A Good Night Out, which, you know, was written late 70s now, but still feels massively relevant. And I still feel like lots of people think that if they go to the theatre, they have to sit quietly and dress a certain way and, you know, be massively respectful. And there is something to be said for that. But we also feel like, you know, the audience is the most important thing. And if they're not having a good time, if they're not enjoying their night out, then why should they go? Why would they bother? Yeah. Well, even Brecht did actually say that theatre can have a message, but first of all, it's got to be fun, which a lot of people who perform Brecht don't seem to understand. But absolutely, John McGrath, he was about taking politically relevant theatre directly to the people that it affected, wasn't he? Yeah, exactly. And I think breaking free of that echo chamber feels so important at the moment, and not just, you know, performing plays to people that already agree with you, but actually going and saying, look, let's have these difficult conversations through a live event with other people. And I think that's what theatre's for, and that's where theatre's at its strongest. So you have this style that you mentioned before. I can't remember what label you gave to it, but it's sort of a clubbing feel to it, and you've got a theatrical story that you're putting across. How do you resolve those together so that we do get both, and it's not one then the other? It's a really good question. I think we've recently started to find better ways of doing that. When we first started, it was very much, they were very separate, and it was very much that we created the look and the feel of a night out, but actually people were still sat in a black box theatre, and it still felt quite you had to sit and listen to the story. Whereas all we ever wanted when we first did it recently in Hull, it took place in a nightclub. People were stood there, the bar was open throughout. In between each act, because when we did it in Hull, it was 3 separate acts. It had local bands performing in between, so it was just about making it feel a bit more multidisciplinary and just making it feel like you can set your own rules rather than, okay, now this is the bit where you sit quietly and this is the bit where you do this. We just basically want the audience to be in charge of their experience. And I think the way that we've found of doing that is that the plays are written with that in mind. So, all Shakespeare used to know that its audience would be off getting drunk and having fights. Yeah. So it would have to put reminders throughout the play so that people knew, what they'd missed. And I think we just, basically what we started doing is accepting that the plays need to match the form and the plays need to match what the actual experience is going to be. Whereas before, I think what we tried to do was write a play and then stage it a bit differently. Whereas now it's sort of a holistic approach that every single aspect of it needs to feel different.
Yeah. In a way, it's quite old-fashioned. Like even in the 19th century, you didn't just go to see a play. There'd be a curtain raiser, there might be an orchestra, there might be various other acts. It'd be a full evening, wouldn't it? So that's what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the more we delve into this, the more like circular it all feels. Like there's so many people that throughout history have been doing this. And I think, in a way we're doing something new, but in a way we're just doing what people have always done, which is try to get more people to the theatre and try to reach more people with a story. So it's both revolutionary and just completely bog standard, really, what we're doing. But I do think it all comes from a belief that when we go to theatres, and I'm using theatres as in the plush buildings that we think of, we often feel like even we stand out, and we're people that make theatre and we're people that love theatre. But if we stand out, what do people who don't regularly go and don't work in it, how do they feel when they go to those buildings? So I think it's just a response to the question of how do we cater for people that currently aren't being catered for in theatre? Yeah.
You did this, it was about a month ago, wasn't it, in Hull, and you've got Latitude this coming weekend, and you've got next month you're in Edinburgh. Has anything changed since last month to be performing in a tent next weekend and wherever it is you're going to be in Edinburgh? You're going to be, is it at Roundabout in Edinburgh?
Yeah, we're at Roundabout, yeah. So
is it changing?
Yes. It's changing in some really boring ways, which are, things like practicalities, and we've had to scale down the costume changes and all of that kind of thing, because what we've lost basically is 2 intervals in between the action. Right. So we're having to just be a bit more creative in how we merge it together as a piece. We've also made a few cuts because it's got to run to a sort of 75-minute through line. Yeah. But I think actually what we're really keen to do is to just make it responsive to wherever it's going. Again, we're so much about it being live and for this audience in this space at this time that the main difference is going to be that we're not just going to pretend we are where we were before, if that makes sense. We're going to use the fact that we're at Latitude. We're going to use the fact that we're at the Roundabout, which is an amazing sort of 360 space. Yes. So it's very much that, it's every single bit of it's going to change because we're responding to our environment rather than saying, right, we've got this thing that is solid that plops into this other space and we're going to stick to it no matter what. It's very much about responding to the audience, to the space, to the location.
Yeah. The actors that you've got have to be multi-talented, and I saw somewhere that some of the actors had picked up the instruments for the first time to do this show. They actually learned to play instruments just for this show. Is that right?
Yeah, some of them did. Yeah, I mean, the people we're working with are amazing. They work so hard on it, and they're great actors. They're great musicians. They've got a lot to do with this show, and they've just thrown themselves into it and gone for it. And we also work with an amazing composer called James Frewer, who we've worked with quite a lot, who wrote the music, but also he during rehearsals he teaches people these instruments. So. I've got so much respect for them and the way that they work and the way that they look so natural doing it. But alongside that, we also have people that are massively skilled musicians that have been doing it for ages. Yeah. And it's a really nice balance, actually, because those people help the people who are slightly newer to it. But yeah, we function more like a band than a theatre company in many ways, because our rehearsals just, they feel much more like we're sort of in a garage making noise than anything else. But yeah, basically, just everyone we work with, they're just amazing. They're multi-skilled, they're triple threat, and they work really hard at these sort of strange instruments they have put in their hand in the first week. So yeah, big respect for them.
And you've released a 4-track EP as well, haven't you?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we're kind of interested in this whole idea of people knowing some of the songs before they see the show. One of the things we love about going to see our favourite bands is that you wait for that song, and when it comes on, you sing along, or you already have a relationship with it. And we're just interested in how theatre can do that. And it's not easy because people have really different, reactions to preparing to go to those events, but we just thought it'd be a really interesting thing to put it out there, and it seems like we've had some really nice responses from it. So so it's been fun.
Well, it worked for Lloyd Webber back in the 60s with Jesus Christ Superstar, so why not?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's all circular. It's just we're just trying to find our new way of doing it, and things like Spotify, and people can have a relationship with music without necessarily going out and purchasing it now. So it feels like we could take advantage of that.
You've worked on a couple of projects with the writer Luke Barnes before, Weekend Rockstars and 10-Story Love Song. What is it that you like about working with him? Why do you keep coming back together?
So I first saw Luke's play Bottleneck at the Fringe about 4 years ago now, I guess, which was about the Hillsborough disaster. And after that, I saw Chapel Street, which he wrote as well. And both of them just were everything that I think theatre should be. They're stories about humanity and about the working class that aren't at all patronising and aren't at all, they're not poverty porn, they're not, it's just about what it means to be human. And they're true characters who I recognise, who I know, who I am. And so when I saw both those plays, I was like, oh, Luke's the writer that comes closest to the sort of work I want to make of the stuff that I'd seen. And so it just felt like a really natural fit. And then I went and met Luke at Northern Stage in Newcastle. We had a cup of tea, and we just had really similar values about what we wanted to do. And it's been a really lovely collaboration because we've both sort of grown and developed in terms of our ambition together, because I think when we both started, we were both sort of fairly early in our careers, and we knew what we wanted to do, but we hadn't really had the space and the place in which to do it. But yeah, I think there's just those commonalities of values that are really important, in that we both want theatre to be the same thing, and together we've sort of found ways of making that happen. And it's sort of become an unofficial trilogy, actually, because there's common themes within all three of those pieces, and it was never planned to be a trilogy. It was just that it felt like a really natural thing that we were developing, and I'm sure we'll work with Luke again at some point in the future. But we're really interested in finding writers that share those values of the kind of stories we want to tell, the ways in which we want to tell stories, and the audiences we want to reach.
Well, what's your process of working together? Does he bring a script to you and you direct it, or is it more collaborative than that?
It's kind of difficult to quantify, because obviously it's so changeable, and it kind of goes through this massive process where you sort of lose where it all came from. But I think our really basic thing is that we come together first of all to sort of think of a big question for humanity. So, the one about All We Ever Wanted was, how did we become who we are? And then the play and the characters sort of move on from there. And with Weekend Rockstars, we spoke about Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, which basically talks about cumulative disadvantage and how, the disadvantage that we find in our early years, how does that affect our later years? And what we tend to do is start with a big, big theme like that. We talk about it for a little while, and then Luke goes away and sort of turns that into a human story. Yeah. And that's kind of where we get to. And then from there, it becomes a sort of, standard dramaturgical conversation. And then at some point within that, we start to think about the music, and James comes into that as well. And he writes the music sort of at quite an early stage as well. And as I say, music kind of runs through it from very early conversations as well. So it's, what does this sound like? What does this feel like? And it's, as I say, it's a response to a massive human question that we then find these sort of characters that become vehicles to explore that further.
Yeah, that's the difficult part. If you're dealing with issues, it's difficult to not be too didactic to actually find the story that goes through it that's going to interest people, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And early on, not with Luke, but early on in some of Middlechild's work, we definitely found that we were too sort of on the nose in terms of this person represents this thing, and this person exists to be a vehicle for this political question. And actually, people are more complex than that. People are more nuanced than that. And I think one of the things that I'm really proud of what we've done with Luke is that the people are people first and foremost, and any politics that we touch on within that are a result of the circumstances they're born into, rather than, okay, this person represents, a class struggle or something like that. I think he's great at writing nuanced, flawed people.
Yeah, like us all.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
So after this play, have you got any plans for what's next for Middle Child?
So we've just had amazing news, which is that we were successful in getting MPO funding. So we're becoming part of. Thank you. Yeah, no, it was a bit of a surreal day, and I was up since 5, sort of unable to sleep. So it was nice. But basically that's a game changer for us. And although we'll be operating on similar sort of finances as what we've had before in this previous year, it just means that we've got that security to put a long-term plan into place, and that we can now say, here's how we're going to build towards, changing the perceptions of theatre for an audience. Because as so many theatre companies do, we've been, at the behest of Grants for the Arts, which we've been massively supported by, but it's difficult to not know, if you're going to have funding in 6 months' time or not. So this just allows us to be a bit more just have a bit more of a thought-through plan, and just be have a longer-term strategy in place that we can actually stick to. And one of the things I'm really keen is that it doesn't become that we sort of have this pot of money that we're protecting, but that we are quite outward facing in terms of people we can collaborate with and people that we can help in any way. And I think that at the moment it's really important that anyone with a little bit of money or a little bit of security can help those without. And I think that's what we're going to really try and do with our money. And I don't know, just try and sort of make it a collaborative thing and move forward with other people in the city and other creatives. But basically it's a weird situation to be in, to suddenly be like, oh, we've got a bit of security. It's just, it's been so sort of hand to mouth the whole time that we've been doing this. So
yeah. Do you feel more sort of grown up and business-like now then?
I think we will do. My to-do list and our to-do list is suddenly massive. So I think once it starts to feel real, because it doesn't kick in till April, I think it will start to feel like that. But I mean, to be honest, we've been working full-time anyway, and we've been working all day, every day, till late at night doing this. We just haven't been paid for it. So the only thing that actually changes is that we can afford some nicer bread, or we can pay rent without worrying just as much. But actually, like, the structure that the company put in place for a while now means that we've been running like a full-time company for a long time. We just now have the finances to do that long-term with a bit more guarantee.
All We Ever Wanted Was Everything by Luke Barnes will be performed by Middle Child in the Cabaret Theatre at Latitude Festival in Southwold, Suffolk on Sunday the 16th of July, before appearing at Reading Fringe on the 20th of July, and for a full run at Plough's Roundabout Theatre at Summerhall for the Edinburgh Fringe from the 4th to the 27th of August 2017. For more information about Middle Child, see www.middlechildtheatre.co.uk, or to find out more about Latitude, see www.latitudefestival.com. You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.